Have you ever felt the deep ache of your soul crying out for more? Perhaps it's the relentless storm of life, bills piling up, relationships fractured, or the quiet, unshakable fear that peace and joy may forever elude you. Beloved, if this resonates in your heart, you're not alone. You're not forgotten. You are deeply cherished, and there is hope, a divine hope that surpasses all understanding. Life's trials may feel like an unyielding wave, crashing against you, leaving you weary and searching. But hear this truth: it is not your fault. The burdens you carry were never meant to define you. They were never meant to steal the light from your soul. The pain, the struggles, and the heartache you've endured are not the end of your story. Every tear you've cried, every moment of despair, has not been in vain. All this pain, as overwhelming as it may feel, has a purpose. It has led you here, to this very moment. It has brought you to a divine crossroads where God's mercy and grace are waiting to turn your trials into triumph. Your journey, with all its challenges, has prepared you for the breakthrough that begins today. What if I told you there is a prayer, an ancient holy prayer, breathed by the Holy Spirit Himself, that holds the power to completely transform your life? Imagine God's boundless love pouring into your health, your relationships, your finances, and your spiritual journey, filling every corner of your being with His miraculous power. You might be wondering, could this truly be for me? Beloved, the answer is a resounding yes. And here's the beautiful truth: this happens today. This moment right now is your divine appointment, a sacred turning point where God's power begins to work mightily in your life. This prayer has changed lives, turned mourning into dancing, and transformed despair into unspeakable joy for those who dare to believe. It is not complicated. It is not out of reach. It is holy, simple, and divinely powerful, and it is waiting for you. By the time you finish watching this short video, you'll know exactly how to pray the sacred prayer, how to align your heart with God's perfect will, and how to welcome His supernatural power into your life. God is calling you, beloved. Can you feel His presence? His arms are open wide, ready to deliver you into the breakthrough you've been longing for. He is ready to turn your tears into triumph and your burdens into blessings. Before I continue, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Mike Wheeler, and just a year ago, I was living a waking nightmare. I grew up in a small, God-fearing town where faith was our lifeline, but poverty was a constant shadow. My parents worked tirelessly, my father as a factory hand, and my mother doing odd jobs in people's homes. They gave everything they had, but it was never enough. Most days, dinner was soup made from scraps or leftover potatoes. Winters were the hardest when we huddled under blankets because we couldn't afford to heat the house. As I got older, I made a vow to myself. I would break this cycle. I thought, if I work harder, pray louder, and follow God's path, He will bless me. I clung to the belief that my hard work and faith would shield me from the life I had grown up with. But life had other plans. I married young, full of love and hope, with dreams of a better future. I looked at my wife and promised her we'd never know the hunger and hardship my parents endured. But no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many extra shifts I took, the bills didn't just grow, they became mountains I couldn't climb. The debt was relentless. Utility companies were constantly calling, threatening to cut us off. Our car broke down and we couldn't afford to fix it. And our landlord? When we fell behind on rent, she changed the locks on our apartment and left our belongings on the curb as a harsh reminder of her priorities. My wife and I spent 2 weeks living in a motel, eating instant noodles because it was all we could afford. The stress began to weigh heavily on us, on my marriage, on my health, on my soul. My wife and I argued, not out of a lack of love, but out of fear. Fear of what the next day would bring. Fear of losing each other in the struggle. Then the unthinkable happened. My wife was diagnosed with end-stage ovarian cancer. The doctor, trying to be gentle, told us she had 6 months to live. My world shattered in that sterile white office. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. We couldn't afford the treatments that might save her. And then came the breaking point. The doctor gave us 2 options. One medication would help her last close to the 6 months mark, but she would endure immense pain every single day. The other medication could ease her suffering and make her final months bearable. But it came with a five-figure price tag money we didn't have. I remember sitting across from her, tears streaming down my face as she reached for my hand. She smiled at me. That same soft, comforting smile that had always held me together, and said, "Mike, take the cheaper option. At least we'll still have some money for groceries." Besides, she tried to joke through the tears, 6 months later, you'll have one less person to feed. I broke. I broke like I'd never broken before. I fell to my knees, clutching her hand, sobbing and apologizing over and over. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry for being useless, for failing you, for putting you in this position." We didn't speak much that night. She just held me, even though I was the one who should have been holding her. The days that followed felt like an endless void. Our money was gone, our hope was slipping away, and I was drowning in guilt and despair. Then one night, as I sat in the dark, staring at the unpaid bills and eviction notice on the table, I grabbed my Bible. It felt heavier than it ever had before. I clutched it to my chest, fell to my knees, and cried out to God, "Lord, why? Why have you abandoned me? I've done everything I can. I've worked, I've prayed, I've begged. Please, God, show me a way out of this. I can't do it anymore. I can't take this anymore." I cried until I couldn't cry anymore, until my body gave out and my spirit felt utterly broken. But little did I know, God had already set a plan in motion, a divine plan to turn my life around. What I thought was the end was only the beginning of something miraculous. My cries at night weren't met with silence. They were the key to unlocking the breakthrough I had been praying for. It had been one of those days where the weight of my life felt unbearable. The crushing despair, the hopelessness, the relentless questions of why they were all pressing down on me. After a grueling day of trying to figure out how to keep going, I found myself walking to a nearby park. I didn't know why I chose that place. Maybe I thought the solitude would help me think. Maybe I just needed to escape the walls of my home and the suffocating reality inside it. I headed toward a park bench I had seen on previous walks, a quiet place under the trees where I thought I could gather my thoughts. But as I neared, the path became strangely dark. The streetlights that once lit the way were out, and the surrounding trees cast eerie shadows. It was as if the world itself wanted to cloak me in its sadness. I kept walking, pushing through the thick branches and underbrush, determined to reach that bench. And then it happened. I stumbled, lost my footing, and fell. But this was no ordinary fall. It felt endless, like I was plunging into a void. My breath caught in my throat, my body weightless as I descended. I could hear the rush of wind around me, and then nothing. Darkness enveloped me, and I felt my consciousness slip away. When I woke, I wasn't where I expected to be. Instead of the cold, hard ground, I was lying on something soft. My body felt rested in a way it hadn't in months. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw a monk, dressed in robes so simple yet radiant, they seemed to glow. He sat calmly, watching me with a gentle yet powerful gaze. "Welcome, Mike," he said, his voice serene, yet filled with authority. I was taken aback. How do you know my name?" He smiled. "You were meant to be here. God has led you to this moment. It is no accident." I frowned, still skeptical, the bitterness in my heart bubbling up. God's plan? If this is His plan, then why is my wife dying? Why have I struggled my entire life? What kind of plan is this? The monk's expression softened further. "Why do you think you have struggled, Mike? Why do you think your wife is dying?" he asked gently. I shook my head, frustrated and lost. "I don't know. Why would God allow this?" He leaned forward, his eyes filled with compassion. "Every instance of pain, every trial, every tear has been leading you to this moment. Even the choice you made to come to the park tonight was no coincidence. Tell me, why did you come here?" His words struck a chord deep within me. I thought about why I had come to that bench. Was it truly random, or had something been drawing me there all along? The monk stood, motioning for me to follow. I noticed for the first time that we were in an underground chamber, lined with bookshelves that stretched endlessly in every direction. It was like a sacred library, filled with wisdom far beyond my comprehension. He reached for a small worn page and handed it to me. "This one," he said, "is a prayer. It is ancient, powerful, and anointed by the Spirit of God. This prayer was lost for generations, but it was preserved for a time such as this. It has the power to transform lives and to heal the brokenhearted. God heals, Mike. He has always healed." I looked at him, still skeptical. "But my wife," the monk smiled gently. "The Bible is filled with stories of healing, of restoration," he said. "Do you remember how Jesus healed the man with leprosy in Matthew 8? With a single touch, he said, 'Be clean,' and the man was healed instantly. Or how in Luke 17, 10 lepers were restored after they cried out for mercy. Do you recall how he restored the withered hand in Matthew 12? Or healed the lame man in John 5, who couldn't walk for 38 years? And what about the woman in Mark 5, who had suffered with internal bleeding for 12 long years? With one touch of his garment, she was made whole." The monk paused, letting the words settle over me. These miracles were not just for the past. God's power is the same yesterday, today, and forever. This prayer is a reminder of that power, a key to unlock the blessings and healing He has for you. For the first time in months, I felt something stir within me. Hope. I wasn't sure if it was real, but it was there, like a small flame in the darkness. The monk placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Believe, Mike. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning. God has not forsaken you." Before I could say anything more, an overwhelming drowsiness came over me. My eyes grew heavy, and I couldn't resist it. The last thing I saw was the monk's serene face, still smiling, before everything faded to black. When I woke up, I was sitting on the park bench I had been walking toward. At first, I thought it had all been a dream, but then I noticed something in my hand, a slip of paper folded neatly. I opened it and saw the prayer. It was real. Something had changed. For the first time in my life, I believed something could be different. I didn't know how, but I knew this prayer was the beginning of a miracle. With renewed hope coursing through my veins, I held the slip of paper in my trembling hands. The prayer, short, simple, yet filled with a power I couldn't comprehend, felt alive in my grip. Kneeling down right there in my small, dimly lit living room, I closed my eyes and recited the prayer. I didn't fully understand it, but I believed it. For the first time in years, I truly believed. From that moment, things began to shift. The first sign came unexpectedly, just a few days later. I was in the kitchen sorting through some old items when the cupboard door above me suddenly gave way. The entire structure came crashing down, sending dishes and random objects scattering everywhere. I managed to shield myself, escaping with just a minor cut on my arm. As I picked myself up and surveyed the mess, I noticed something odd. A small wooden box had fallen out, one I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it and gasped. Inside was a delicate, ornate antique, an intricate piece of jewelry that looked ancient yet pristine. It was then that I remembered something from years ago. When I was 10 years old, my grandmother had given me that very box. I had forgotten all about it until now. I could still hear her voice as clear as day. "Mike, if you ever find yourself at the end of your rope, when all hope seems lost, sell this. It's your safety net." I took the antique to an appraiser the next day, my heart pounding with every step. To my astonishment, the appraiser's eyes widened as he examined it. "This is a lost piece," he said. "It's worth a small fortune." A small fortune turned out to be $50,000. I could hardly breathe as I held the check in my hands. It felt surreal. God had provided in a way I never could have imagined. But that wasn't the only miracle. A week later, as we prepared for my wife's next doctor visit, the hospital called us. The nurse on the line sounded excited yet confused. "Mr. Wheeler, your wife's account has been paid in full," she said. "What?" I stammered. "By whom?" "There's no name," she replied, "just a note left with the payment." We rushed to the hospital and found the note waiting for us at the front desk. My hands shook as I unfolded it and read the words, "Believe in God, for He creates miracles." Beneath the message was a Bible verse, one that pierced my heart. "With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." Matthew 19:26. The nurse told us that the donation had come from someone whose life my wife had touched long ago. Whoever it was didn't want to be named. They simply wanted to help her in her time of need. I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. This wasn't a coincidence. This was divine intervention. As the weeks passed, more miracles unfolded. My wife began to feel stronger, her pain easing day by day. The doctors were baffled. They ran test after test, only to find her cancer had started to shrink. They had no explanation for it. But I did. With the money from the antique, we paid off our debts and began to rebuild our lives. I partnered with an old friend to start a small business, something I had dreamed about for years but never thought possible. Within 3 months, the business took off, and we were earning $15,000 a month. Then came the greatest miracle of all. 3 months after her diagnosis had turned our world upside down, my wife sat across from me, tears streaming down her face. But this time, they were tears of joy. "Mike," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm pregnant." I stared at her, unable to speak. She smiled through her tears and added, "It's twins." The room seemed to fill with light. My heart, once so heavy, was now overflowing with gratitude and awe. The cancer was gone. My wife was thriving. We were thriving. Looking back, I now see how every hardship, every tear, every moment of despair had led us to this point. God's plan had been at work all along. The prayer I had doubted, the monk I had questioned, the miracles that followed all of it was proof of his divine intervention. God had turned my mourning into dancing, my despair into hope. "For I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord, "plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future." Jeremiah 29:11. I share this with you now because I believe it is no accident that you're reading this. Just as God transformed my life, He can transform yours. All it takes is faith and a willingness to believe in His miraculous power. I call this miracle God's holy prayer. Beloved, there is a reason you're here right now. It's no accident that you've come across this message. God's holy prayer has been revealed for such a time as this, to bring miracles into the lives of those who believe and take that first step of faith. This ancient sacred prayer holds the power to transform every area of your life. It's not just a collection of words, it's a divine tool, anointed by the Holy Spirit, that can unlock the blessings God has already prepared for you. If you are weighed down by the crushing burden of debt, if you wake up every day feeling the ache of sickness in your body, or if you feel like your relationships are slipping through your fingers, this prayer will change your life. Are you struggling to pay your bills, watching the numbers in your account dwindle, and wondering how you'll make it through another month? Imagine the doors that could open for you when God's abundance is released over your finances. He has the power to bring unexpected blessings and provisions into your life. Are you or someone you love battling illness, pain, or a diagnosis that feels impossible to overcome? Through the ages, God has proven His power to heal. Think of the lepers Jesus touched and made whole, the lame man who rose to walk, the woman who bled for 12 years and was healed with just a touch of His garment. That same healing power is alive today and ready to work in your life. Are you watching your family fall apart, feeling the sting of broken relationships and misunderstandings? This prayer can bring peace, restoration, and harmony where there was once discord. It can soften hearts and renew love in ways you never thought possible. If you feel lost, defeated, or abandoned, if you wonder whether your cries have been heard, know this: God has not forgotten you. He sees you, He loves you, and He wants to lead you into a life of miracles. God's holy prayer is your divine invitation to transformation. When you recite this prayer with faith, you're aligning yourself with God's will and opening the doors for His supernatural intervention. The power of this prayer comes not just from the words themselves, but from the Spirit of God moving through them. It is your key to breaking free from financial struggles, experiencing miraculous healing in your body or the body of a loved one, restoring broken relationships and bringing peace to your heart, finding renewed strength, hope, and purpose. This is your moment. God's holy prayer has changed the lives of countless believers, and it can change yours too. It's time to take that step of faith, to invite God's miracles into your life, and to see what he can do when you place your trust in him. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. In Romans 8:28. Are you ready to experience the breakthrough you've been praying for? Believe and let God's holy prayer guide you into the miraculous life he has planned for you. Beloved, this sacred and ancient prayer is more than just words. It is a divine gift, preserved through time and revealed for this moment to transform your life. I must be honest with you. There is a reason why a small fee is associated with accessing this prayer. It is not for profit, but for protection. Over the months, there have been relentless attempts by the Russians to gain access to this prayer, including hackers trying to exploit it for their own selfish purposes. Some have even attempted to weaponize it for destructive goals like furthering war. One such group made repeated attempts to breach our secure servers to use the prayer solely for their own gain. Thankfully, by God's grace, our secure systems have held strong, preventing these acts and safeguarding this prayer for those who seek it with pure hearts and good intentions. This may not always be the case. As much as it pains me to say this, there may come a time when I am forced to remove this prayer indefinitely to ensure it remains untarnished and used only for God's purpose. That time has not come yet, but while it is still available, I urge you to take this step now. The fact that you are here is no accident. It tells me something about you, that you are a good person with a heart that longs for change, for healing, and for restoration. God does not place this kind of opportunity before someone who would use it for harm. As Jesus said, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. In Matthew 7:7. You are here because you are knocking on that door. You are seeking answers, and God is showing you the path forward. This prayer is not just about changing your circumstances, it's about transforming your life and aligning it with God's divine will. It's about stepping into the miracles he has prepared for you, just as he promises. Beloved, the time to act is now. Don't let this moment pass you by. The fact that you're reading this is evidence that God is working in your life, leading you to this divine encounter. This is your chance to unlock the blessings, healing, and abundance he has waiting for you. And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:19. Take that step of faith. Trust in his plan. Let God's holy prayer guide you into the miraculous life he has ordained for you. May his peace, love, and blessings fill your heart always. Amen.